So here's your calculator. So hopefully you guys know just how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, like the basic kind of stuff. And then if we're going to put in data, most of the stuff we're going to be running is here in the stat button, okay? And you guys can take notes anywhere you want to if you need to write down any of the calculator keystrokes. For those of you that have a different one, like a Casio, if you know how to use it, awesome. If you don't know how to use it, I can help you at a separate time where we can like look it up. But our department tends to use these most of the time. That's like what we had a grant to get. So if you don't know how to do it on there, grab one of these for now and we'll look it up later. If you know how to do it on there, then you're good to go, okay? So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the calculator, our data, okay? So we're going to push the stat button. Okay. And notice there's like 3 categories up at the top: edit, calc, and tests. So these are 3 different things that we can do with data. We can edit lists of data, we can calculate different things, and then we can run these statistical tests. In this class, we're not going to run any statistical tests, but when you take AP Stats, you will, okay? And you'll find out like how relevant a piece of information is or how well correlated it is. We're going to edit lists, and then we're going to do some sort of calculation to get this least squares regression line. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to edit. And then when you go there, you should see something like L1, L2, L3. If one of yours is missing, it just got deleted on accident or something like that, okay? If you restore your calculator back to its original settings, it would show back up. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of them, so you don't need those specific ones. But the names just matter because you have to tell the calculator later, like, I want you to do this calculation with the data I entered in these 2 lists right here, okay? We are going to enter our data in. You see that I have data in there, but that data is old. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll to the very top of the list, and I'm going to press the clear button. This is extremely important. If you press another button, like the delete button, you will delete the entire list. It will no longer exist. But if you press the clear button, and then you press enter, it will all at once take all the data out of the list that might have been there before. Okay? So just handy instead of having to delete the data piece by piece. So on each list, I'm pressing clear so my lists are empty. What you're now going to do is you're going to put in your data for your knot tying. Okay? So go ahead and take a minute and put in your data. Here's how you would put it in. Can I borrow your data just your data for a minute? So if I was putting this in, you guys have a list. I would start at one list and enter in all the values that are like the X values from my list. And then I would enter in the Y values that go with each of those. Okay? And I just am entering the number and pressing enter, and it's moving me to the next line. Okay? Can I keep using your data? Is that okay, Al? Yeah. Okay. And then you can copy it off of there. And I have sample data. And then your list should match up, and you'll want to look over them. For example, right now, everybody just go ahead and press your graph button. How many people have a nice, pretty picture like I do? How many people have something random on the screen? How many people have nothing on the screen, just like an XY axis? Okay, so clearly just pushing graph is not going to be enough information. So one way to deal with it is there is a button right here called window. If you press the window button, you'll see that it asks you things like X minimum, X maximum, X scale, Y minimum, Y maximum, Y scale. We could adjust our window just like we would scale a graph if we were drawing the scatter plot ourselves by telling the calculator what to do. But the calculator is pretty amazing And if it knows what to do, it can scale all of that for you. So we're going to try and tell it what to do right now. We are going to use, instead of just going to graph, we're going to go into this little stat plot button right there. So when we want to scatter plot, we want to plot statistical information. That's when the stat plot button is useful. So anytime you're entering data and you want to see it on a graph, whether it's a histogram, a box plot, a bar graph, or a scatter plot, that stat plot is where we want to look. So in order to get to that, we're going to push, for those of you who are unfamiliar, the second button and then that, okay, that y equals. So that should give us stat plot. And so if you guys look, most of yours probably say off next to all of them, right? So these are 3 different stat plots. I can go in and turn any individual one on or off. So we're just going to go to the first one, see how the black cursor is around the number 1, and I'm going to press enter. You guys do the same. So see, mine is on. See how the black cursor or boldness is around the on? Yours probably was around the off, but you can be on top of on right now and press enter, and it will turn it on. All right, so first we make sure it's on. Second, we make sure that we have the type of graph that we want. So if you arrow down, look at all the choices that you have. I'm currently on a scatter plot graph, just a plot of points. They could connect it, they could draw a bar graph, box and whisker plots, okay, but right now we just want scatter plots. We want to look at the data points. Right? The next thing is you have to tell the calculator which list the data is in. So my X's, my number of knots I had in the rope, was in list 1, and then my Y's, the length of the rope, was in list 2. About this as well. See the L1 and L2? See how the 1 is like little next to the L? I didn't type the letter L and then type the number 1. The calculator doesn't know what that is. That is the letter L, and if you stored any number value in there, times the number 1. However, notice in blue right here, L1, L2, L3, that the calculator already has those. That's where you would type the list. That's how it knows to go get those programmed data pieces in those lists, okay? So someone's programmed it for you. You have to use the appropriate language so it knows. So if you ever want to change the lists, make sure you're not trying to type them in yourself piece by piece, but you're actually using their name that's already been programmed into the calculator, okay? And then you can choose the mark. Do you want your dots marked with little boxes, little pluses, or tiny little dots? You choose, okay? It still doesn't automatically go anywhere. Okay, press graph again, and I bet you still see whatever you saw before. Yeah? So it seems like you did nothing, right? Maybe some people see what they see before, plus little dots, depending on what your window is. Okay, so first of all, in case there is something in there that we don't want to see, we want to get rid of it. So the other place there might be stuff typed that's being graphed in your y equals. That's where you keep list of equations. So if I didn't want to graph data and I just wanted to see what like the line 2x plus 1 looks like, I would go to y equals and type that in to look at the graph. So let's just go to our y equals and make sure nothing else is in there. So when I go to y equals, so see, I have something else in there. You're not seeing it because I have my window already set to a nice place, but my graph is not only graphing this data, it's graphing that cubic function at the same time, okay? The cubic function is just so far away from the data that we're not seeing it in the viewing window of the graph. But if you were seeing something sporadic running across your graph, it's possible that you had something else typed in here to turn on. So you have 2 options. You can clear out the equation completely, so you can just be on top of it, press clear, and scroll down, it should go away. Or, let's say the equation's really important to you. You're using it for a project or something like that, and you don't want to delete it. The other option is to just scroll on top of the equal sign, and you can basically turn it on and off. So the equal sign was bold before, which meant it was on, and it was showing that on the graph, even though we couldn't see it because the window was weird. If I press enter on top of the equal sign now, notice that the equal sign for that equation is no longer bold. That equation is still in there, but I have told the calculator I don't want it to graph it on the screen. Okay? So just a little piece of information about where you can type it. We're trying to learn calculator right now at the same time of just putting in our data, right? So we can put it in there. So now the question is, how do we get our graph to zoom perfectly to our data? Either we go to that window button and we set the window ourselves, just like we would for a graph. But again, your calculator has been programmed pretty intelligently. So a lot of time you will have to do it yourself. But this time you won't have to do it yourself. If you have data, the calculator can go read the data and it can set the window up for you, which is pretty amazing. So the way that you do that is instead of going to the window and typing it in yourself, you're going to go to the zoom button. And it has all these random choices. You can like create a zooming box. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can zoom to a square. The zoom standard is what it's normally set out at the beginning. So those of you who this was the first time you used your calculator, it probably went from like positive 10 to negative 10, positive 10 to negative 10 kind of thing. It can zoom specifically to trig functions. That's what 7 means. But if we keep scrolling down this menu, sorry, I'm a little slower than you guys. Okay, so it has all these zoom settings, but look at choice 9. See how it says zoom stat? That means it will zoom to whatever data you have turned on in your data plot. So we already turned on a stat plot and said we wanted a scatter plot with specific data. So now if we tell the calculator to zoom stat, it knows like, oh, I need to go look at those lists, see what the numbers are, and make a window that can view them. So you guys don't have to do any work. You can thank the calculator later. We're going to just choose choice 9. You either press enter on it or just hit 9. And now when you zoom choice 9, we should all see a window that's fitting for our data. Okay? Anybody not see a window where their data's fitted in? Okay, so your data is there, but your axes are set here. Let me pause this. So we have the scatter plot, but we don't have the line of best fit yet. So remember I said in that stat menu, we could like edit things. So we edited a list and we found out how to look at the data. But then there was also a calculate menu in there, and that's what we want to do now. We want to calculate the equation of the line, and we want it to put the equation of the line straight onto the graph. So we want it to like automatically save the equation of the line into that y equals menu where I had that other equation before, so that it will like show up on the graph with the data and we can look at them. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, so how do we get this equation of this line? We go back to stat because we're trying to do a stat calculation. This time we scroll over to calc. And then you're going to have lots of choices. But right now we're just trying to get a line. So see choice 4 that says lin reg. That means linear regression. And it's of the form ax plus b, meaning they're going to give you an a, and that's supposed to be the number in your slope position. And they're going to give you a b, and that's supposed to be the number in your y-intercept position to write this line in slope-intercept form. Okay? So I'm going to choose choice 4 either by pushing 4 or by scrolling down to it and pressing enter. And now depending on how old or how new your calculator is, it might look like this, or you might see a menu where it asks you for specific things. Okay? If it asks you for specific things, the first thing it asks you for is your X list. If you put it in L1 that we did, that should say L1. If you put it in a different one, you would have a different list listed there. And your Y list was L2. That's where I have them. If you had them somewhere else, put them in. On mine, notice it doesn't give me that beautiful little menu. I'm supposed to know what I'm supposed to tell the calculator. Lucky for me, I've had a lot of experience, but for others of us, we'll have to learn. So I push L1, L2. That tells the calculator those are my X's and my Y's. Okay. The next thing on your menu, sorry, you got the bad seat. It says like frequently list, like frequency of the list. We can leave that blank because we can just use our data. But then before calculate, there's one other thing. It says store reg EQ. That means, do you want me to store this regression equation? Like, I'm going to go do the work for you and find the equation of the line that fits this. Do you want to store it somewhere? And we do. We want to store it over in that y equals menu so that it's already ready to like be put in our graph and we don't have to retype it into there. So for those of you that have the menu, go down to where it says store reg EQ. For those of you that don't have the menu, we just have to put another comma and write where we wanted to store it after this, okay? And then here's the tricky part. Everything in that y equals menu is called like y1, y2, y3. Like you can just write a million different equations in there and that's how they're labeled. But we have to go find in the calculator where they programmed it. Like we can't just type a y and then a 1. It doesn't understand that as, oh, that means that equation. We have to find out where did the programmer put those names in this calculator, and unfortunately, it's not as easy as the lists. They didn't put them nice right here. They're like buried in a menu that we have to go find them, okay? So the menu that they're buried in is this one right here, vars, because this would make sense as far as like variables. Like that's what we're going to find, those Y things. So we're going to press that. So anybody right now, doesn't matter if you have the beautiful little menu of things to write down or you're typing it like this. We want to store it there. So we're going to go to vars. We're trying to find something about Y1, Y2, whatever. So we're going to arrow over to the YVars menu. And you guys will learn in like pre-calc honors about parametric and polar. So we just deal with basic functions here. So everything we're looking for is under that first choice where it says function. And there's where they have them listed. And now you decide, do you want it in the first spot, the second spot, the third spot? I had something in the first spot, right? So maybe that equation's really special to me. If it's not, I don't even remember what it's from. But let's say that it was, okay? If it's really special to me and I don't want to erase it, then I'm going to pick the second spot to put this one in. If you have nothing in there, you can pick the first spot. It doesn't matter. Just pick something from this menu. It will then type it, and then you press enter, or if you have the nice little menu, you press calculate. Okay? So for Alex's data, his equation of his line would be y equals negative 4.2x plus 63.6. So you all just got an equation. You might not have as many things up there as I have, right? But you all have an a and a b value, right? Write down your equation. You can round it to the nearest tenth if you want. So there's a place for that in number 3. So at number 3, right below the directions, just write down your equation. All right, how many people have r squared and r on their screen? Okay, so let's learn how to turn that on because you guys don't have it on. So that's important to us because these are called the r is called the correlation coefficient. So what the r is supposed to tell me is they found the best line for my data, but like how good is that line? Is it doing a really good job describing my data? Or even though it's the best line we can find, is it not that great? So for example, if I had data that looked like maybe the best fit line would look like that, but the data was kind of all over the place, right? So even though that's the best fit line, is the line really super reliable for that data? It's the best line we could find, but it still might not be a good representation of this data. Like we might just say like, line's not good for that. For most of ours, go ahead and press graph right now, you guys. And you should see your line because we stored it in the equation. So visually, look how well his line fits his data. Pretty darn good, right? Okay. So when I look back, and I know you guys don't have the R, I'll tell you how to get it in just a second. Quit this. Oh, it's not there. Okay, I'm going to tell you how to get it right now, and then we're going to run it again. Okay, so basically, there's something called a diagnostic in your calculator, and it needs to be turned on. You can't really find it anywhere. It's in this catalog. So if you can't find something, absolute value function, whatever, there's a whole catalog inside your calculator. So we're going to push second 0, and it's going to bring us to this like alphabetical list of things. And then notice that my cursor up here has like a little A on it. That means right now it's like in alphabet mode. So I'm actually going to go to this button right here because in alphabet mode, that's the letter D, and I'm trying to find diagnostic. Okay, I'm going to press this button, and it automatically brought me to the D portion of the menu. Okay. I then need to scroll. It doesn't do like 2 letters in a row, so that's a little annoying. Until I find something that says diagnostic. Okay, and I'll walk around and help you guys in a minute. But right here you see diagnostic off and diagnostic on. Okay. I'm going to press diagnostic on. It prints it on my screen, but the action is not done until I press enter again. When it says done, then I know that I'm done. I want to do the calculation we did again. I want to do the regression calculation again so you guys can see your R value. So I can go through the whole thing again, or the calculator can recall the last thing I entered. So this is great when you're doing like quadratic formula multiple times or something like this, because you can just recall the last thing you'd enter and scroll over and change the input number or something that you wanted, okay? So right down here on the enter button, see how the blue word above it says entry? That means it will recall the entries that you put into the calculator. So I push second entry, and it says diagnostic on. That's not what I want. Do it again. Second entry. Oh, there's what I entered to do my regression for my line. And those of you that got the special little menu, you probably don't see the special little menu anymore. You probably see this. Okay? So now this is what I entered. I don't have to enter it again. I'm going to press enter this time. So you should get the same A and B as you did before. It's doing the same calculation with the same data, but now you should see an R value with it. No, and then you have to do that again, but now you're going to have to do it a bunch because you just did that a bunch, so it's going to go through all of those. There. Okay. All right, so look at my R value. It's negative, right? It's negative because the correlation of my points is negative sloping across the graph. Okay, so it can be positive or negative. It's a really good R value because it's 0.99. Basically, the R value is a number that's between 0 and 1. And it tells you how good of a job your line is doing to measure the correlation between this data on like a scale of 0 to 1. So think like a gymnast performing, right? They get rated on a scale of like 0 to 10, how well like their routine did what it said they were going to do, like in all that perfection. Okay. This line is getting rated on a scale of 0 to 1 of how well this line represents the data that you put there. So negative 0.9992 is pretty good. All right. If I have like a 0.7, that's like not very good at all. Okay. So do we understand how to put stuff in the calculator and stuff like this? Okay, it's going to take practice. So the homework on this skill asks you to input stuff into the calculator and stuff like that. Okay, and then I'll tell you guys about a couple different apps or ways that you can access the calculator. So now you guys should be able to go ahead and answer the following questions on your paper. Remember that you've written an equation and now it's going to ask you things like the y-intercept. You don't ever go back to your data. You now will use your equation to answer all of the questions because your equation is supposed to generalize the data into one pattern, okay? So even if I say like after 5 knots, how long is your rope? You don't turn it over to your data table and do your actual. After 5 knots, it was this long. We're talking now in general according to the pattern you set up. So our equation will now answer everything. Okay? And remember in your equation, X is the number of knots and Y is the length of the rope. So like one of the questions asks you to find your slope and what does it represent? What does the slope represent? So if my slope, okay, Alex's slope up here is negative 4.2. What is the meaning of that in the context of this problem? Yeah, Liam. Good, per knot that we tie, right? So remember, you guys think of slope as rise over run, right? But rise in this case is your y coordinate is length of rope. And run in this case, your x coordinate is number of knots. So this is telling me that the rope decreases 4.2 centimeters in length every time I tie a new knot, right? So slope is not just slope anymore and rise over run. It now has like exact situations that describe the rise per the run, and that's what you should be using to interpret it. Okay? So you guys go ahead and work on that. I'm going to pass back some papers for you guys.